this
Oh, okay.
computer. Hello,
Okay.
this is Jesus TV, being broadcast from the Jesus verse, not the metaverse, although we're probably resting on the metaverse, building upon the shoulders of giants like Mark Zuckerberg and those people that Jesus has blessed with sweaty wads of cash to the moon. And we're grateful for that. So grateful for Caesar's. Render to Caesar what's Caesar's. Build your temples on top of Caesar if Jesus tells you to. And that's what I'm grateful for is the internet. Is that built by the devil? I don't think so. I think it's built by Jesus, but the devil hijacks everything. I think I'm built by Jesus, but I think the devil hijacks me. So I'm like the internet. You're like, not everything's good about the internet. Yeah, if the internet's great, that's the truth. Not everything's good about opening a closet. So Emily was talking about just a
Oh, yeah.
normal spending her time normally and then open the closet door and then tell us about the adventure that Jesus had for you. Now, this is what I wanted to make my comment. Emily didn't mention Jesus in the mess that she was doing. She was telling me a bunch of stuff, but she didn't tell me how Jesus, what Jesus is up to. So tell the story, Emily, and I just want to see how it's Jesus-y.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how it's Jesus either. I think it's just me. I don't even know. I mean, I would say me
Yeah.
being dumb, but I don't even know that was me being dumb. It was just a really random fluke. So a few years ago, I built myself these wooden like barn door closet doors for my bedroom. So in December of this year, I was opening my closet door and I got a sliver in my hand. You probably can't see it. You won't be able to see this, but
Oh, I see.
right
Yeah, I see
there's like
that.
a little bump.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's like a little bump thing right here. Anyways, I got a sliver in there. And I thought I got it was a really big sliver actually, and I thought I got it all out, and but my hand kept hurting, and so a couple different times I tried to like get it out, but I'm like I don't see anything, but it still hurts, and I'm just like whatever, and it grew, and the skin healed over the top, and then it just kept hurting me, and now it's been like 7 months, and I went to my normal doctor a few months ago, and he was like, "You're gonna go have to see a hand surgeon." And the particular hand surgeon they referred me to, I didn't want to go see because I've had an experience in the past with that doctor that was less than pleasant. Um, and anyways, so my wrists have been hurting and stuff. So then I started going to a physical therapist, and I showed them that thing, and they were like, "You really do need to go to like a hand surgeon for that." And he was like, "Go to this guy," and I'm like, "Everybody tells me to go to that guy, like everybody." And he's like, "Well, he's really good." I'm like, he's just kind of short. He's like, yeah, he doesn't have good bedside manner, but he's a really good surgeon, and you should listen to what he says. And I was like, fine. So after a few physical therapy appointments, I'm like, fine. So I set up an appointment with him, and I had an appointment this last Thursday. And I go in, and he was like, oh yeah, he's like, you definitely have something in there. It's weird. He's like, because wood slivers usually eject themselves unless it was like a foreign material, like metal or that kind of stuff. You usually have to have surgically removed. But he's like, this is really weird. And he was like, he's like, but where it is, he's like, I think it's on a nerve. Like he had me move my hand and like feel where it is. And he's like, yeah, I can feel it there. He's like, we're gonna have to do surgery. I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, can't you just like cut open here? And he's like, what we have to do, he's like, we have to put a really, really tight tourniquet on your arm, like really insanely tight. And he's like, usually, he's like, we've tried to do this in office before, and usually about 10 minutes in, you're like, I wish I was dead because it hurts so bad to have that I'm like, you can't just like numb it up, and like, and he's like, no, he's like, we have to like dig around in there, and I don't want to accidentally cause you nerve damage in your hand. And I was like, oh, so really the option is surgery,
Yeah.
which is why I
Yeah.
didn't want to see him in the first place because I thought he was going to say surgery. So I put it off for a long time. Anyway, so that being said, I now have surgery next week. I have to go to the hospital and get surgery on my hand for a liver.
Uh,
Um, from opening my closet door, and it's a good thing that I don't know. I think maybe I need to stop doing DIY projects because it's a good thing I saved myself all that money making myself custom barn doors, and then now I have to go get surgery from hurting my hand from it. So
yeah.
I didn't save myself any money or time. I just cost myself a lot more. And then part of my wrist issues now that I'm having are from building myself some custom nightstands. And so apparently I just can't build and make cool stuff anymore. I just need to pay for it. And whatever. It's because I like solid wood things and I don't want to pay solid wood prices. I don't like particle board. I want like solid, nicely made things. And I'm just like, whatever. Buy a $20 nightstand on Amazon, last a couple of years, great. It's better than having to get surgery or having to go 2 times a week to physical therapy for like 3 months. And you could buy a lot for that. Anyways, so he said, "How is Jesus in this mess?"
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, my
Yeah.
only thing I'm thinking is maybe. So the biggest problem why my wrists and hands aren't healing is because I don't give them enough of a break because I get really, really bored. Um, I mean, you guys can tell I don't even stay on here doing nothing. Like I'm always doing something. That's just how I am. So I'm like, maybe when I have this surgery, it'll actually make me stop using my hand, and then maybe it'll finally heal. Because when I don't
Oh,
use it, it feels great. But when I do read it, even just like reading a book, it hurts. If I'm looking at my phone, like holding my phone in my hand, it hurts. Like both hands, like my wrist and stuff. Anyways, I gotta
okay.
turn on a fan because I'm getting really hot in
All right,
here.
do it because
And I didn't
Jonathan
turn
has
on my
his
fan
hand.
before it started.
Jonathan
So
has his hand up before I introduce
raised,
the
yeah. See, I
topic
gotta turn
or
that fan up there on. I'm getting so hot.
propose the topic.
Okay.
So you get your fan.
So
Jonathan, make
are
your
we live?
comment. We're live.
Yeah.
Yep, we're recording. That's right. Keep all your dark secrets quiet.
Are we live?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I was curious. So are you saying that your wrist problem is from a
Um,
sliver years ago or something?
that's actually potentially a thing, my doctor said. So I have a sliver, and I don't actually think that's what causing my wrist problem. But it could be. I don't know. He said the sliver's like in my nerve.
Well, I've got this thumb about 10 or 13 years ago, maybe. I was on a work project and the 2x4, I would call it a sliver, but it was more like a shard. It went in about here and went about this deep, probably about an inch of, um, and then of course it swelled up right away. It hurt like I'd been impaled because I had been, and and I dug around at it trying to get it out, and I couldn't find it, and I had my wife try to find it. It hurt like heck, and I finally left it, and it's still there to this day. You can still feel the lump right there, and it's part of it has dissolved, but the rest must just be, a big lump of scar tissue. I don't know if it's dissolved and it's just scar tissue or what, but I left it in, and sometimes like it'll hurt when I try to grab something, but
That's pretty much almost
uh,
exactly what happened to me. Like it wasn't just like a little sliver. Like it
oh,
was pretty good size. It was like
yeah.
I would say it was probably like let's see, maybe not quite half an inch, but it was like more like you said, more like a shard. And same thing, we dug it a couple times. There's a lot of scars, so it's kind of almost exactly the same thing. So pretty much it came down to I've already met about half of my deductible for the year. My deductible starts over in September because I'm a teacher, and so it was like, well, I could wait, or I've already. They're like,
Mhm.
it might take a few weeks to recover, it might not. So wow, I didn't know that happened to anyone else. So yeah, it's not just like a little tiny sliver. Like it was
Yeah.
pretty beefy, and it hurt. Yeah, like you said, and that's just like what mine is. And it's and so what's been happening as I've been getting my hands worked, like I was doing okay for a while, but as I've been going to physical therapy for my hands and having to wear those wraps, they've been aggravating it again. And it's been like kind of coming to the surface a little bit, and it hurts more as I've been trying to do the physical therapy stuff. Like it's been aggravated. But in any case, there's something in my hand and it needs really deep. I think I got most of it out. I think there's like a little tiny, I bet there's like a little tiny point that's like stuck in there, just like a foreign body. I think it's really interesting how our body, you can compare this to spiritual stuff, but just like how, how our body's like foreign things, it's like this doesn't belong, and it tries to get us out. Because my surgeon was like, yeah, he's like usually with wood stuff, he's like it's like your body will just spit it out. It's like this doesn't belong, and it usually kind of swells and pusses and like pushes it out. And he's like the fact that that didn't happen, he's like that's really weird. Like it must be like really deep, or like scar tissue, or because he's like usually your body will just spit that out. And so I think, I mean, our bodies are really amazing. So yeah, right now the body, it's like there's this weird lump, and it's like I don't know what this is. I can't get rid of it. I'm trying to spit it out. I can't. like the way is blocked. I don't know. We could probably take that somewhere religious, but yeah.
Yeah. Are you guys okay with me?
Yeah, we're done. You have a thing you were going to say, Greg.
Yeah, well, because I intend to hijack your owie to tie it over to a revelation that Jesus gave the world. So this is kind of a multi-pronged comment that will tie about into both of you guys' owie, my own as well. So first thing is, I'm about to read you a revelation. So God has been teaching me, Jesus has been teaching me about revelations. A lot of hidden treasures, because Jesus is really, really big on prophecy. He thinks they're just so wonderful because they actually give you hope. And so if you are told that something sweet's coming your way, whatever it is, you're going to get $1 million in a month from now. That'd make, and if it was reliable, you'd be like, I'm feeling good every day. Like, I'm feeling good because I'm quitting my job in a month from now, or whatever it is, or we're going to go on a trip in a month from now. And so those are prophetic thoughts. You're looking to the future, and you have a promise that there's going to be this. Jesus uses the term promised land. If I can just hold on just a little bit longer, I know we're having marital problems, but it'll all be solved because in a month, they're going to give us $1 million. Woo! Or in a month, we're going to rob a bank. Woo! There's different ways you can get hope in this world. And so hope in Christ is one of the things that I want to have you think about when you hear this prophecy. So he had these people in London, England, write this prophecy. Now, most people don't know that this is a Jesus prophecy. But when I read this, I glued to it like very few other things that have ever been written on the earth. And Jesus later, I mean, I just thought I read a good article, and it was a very insightful article. Jesus says, it's so much more than that, Greg. Anything lovely, good report, or praiseworthy is from me. What you are looking at is a hidden treasure. It's hidden because people don't even know, like they'll read it. Oh, that's interesting. But I had been prepared to recognize it as a pearl of great price, like worth surrendering a whole lot of stuff. You say, nah, I mean, I can hear religious people, because this starts opening up like, so you're saying that there's prophecies in other places than the scriptures? Oh, thousands and millions. And so I now am gaining a deep insight about what hidden treasures of knowledge, because he emphasizes that when he speaks of treasures, this is in the scriptures, treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures. So what I'm going to read to you is a prophecy. I'm going to try to skip over some of it. You can read it on your own, but it was written by, I don't know who. There's an organization called the School of Life, but Jesus brought me to this script. They actually turned this into a movie. You can YouTube it, how to narrate your life, in the on YouTube, and School of Life. You Google that, you'll find it. But it has become very substantial in my understanding of my relationship with Jesus. And so I'm about ready to read it, but before I do, one of the things he's helped me understand, in addition to there's lots of hidden prophecies, and prophecies are like nothing. They're like nothing burgers. Like you, LDS people, Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints people, we treat this Book of Mormon that was given to Joseph Smith by Jesus, we treat it as though it were so precious. Oh, it's so wonderful. This is a book of Revelations. It's so cool. Well, there's some really smart people who've read that and concluded otherwise. It's nothing. It's just, chloroform on print, according to Mark Twain, who read it, or he said he did. He may have just kind of thumbed through it. Who knows? But one person's treasure may be another person's trash. And I'm not here to resolve that. Like, yeah, I can't resolve that. But what I can resolve is that there's some precious things. And in order for them to be precious, you have to treat them precious. And the more precious you treat them, the more energy they will give you. So precious, you could also say sacred, my precious, using Lord of the Rings talk, Golem, that they are empowered, they are imbued with meaning in interaction. So we can find something just like you would Emily's art. If you interact with it with your eyes and your thoughts, maybe you talk about it, think about it, it generates worth. And so that's the nature. That's a preliminary. And the preliminary wasn't necessarily like, oh boy, I hope you don't miss this. I don't care if you miss it. I don't think Jonathan and Emily will miss it, because I'm going to tie it right to the owie story. So Emily's got a sliver. Jonathan had a sliver. And as Emily spoke of it in Jesus in This Mess, because she was starting to tell about it before I even pushed record on this episode. And I noticed, I'm like, hey, Jesus, she's not saying anything about you. She just has this owie. And so this is what Jesus has been training me. It's all me, Greg. And that's what Jesus in This Mess is actually about. If you got a mess, and what if it's a mess with your body? What if it's just something silly? What you could even say stupid. I'm opening up a cupboard, or I'm opening up a closet, and I get a sticker. Did it hurt? Yeah, that's Jesus. Oh, totally, that's Jesus. What? Hurting? Oh, well, yeah. And so that a person who's desperate for Jesus would start looking through the scriptures and saying, let's see if there's a precedent. You say, oh, here's Paul. He says, Jesus, take this thorn. Oh, that's like a sticker, right? Jesus, take this thorn away from me. And Jesus, what does he say? And he asks him 3 times, Jesus, maybe you didn't hear me very well. Can you please take this thorn out of me? No, we don't have surgeons. They will in 2023. But no, you can't have that thorn out. I'm just paraphrasing and making a mashup of what Jesus said. But 3 times he asked, and the Lord said no. And he was teaching Paul about something, about weaknesses, about tribulations. And Paul became trained where he said this, and you don't really see this much in the scriptures. I glory in my weakness. In other words, oh, I'm so happy I got a sticker in my hand. That's high training. Emily's like, well, I'm not going to say I glory in it. I'm kind of complaining. I guess I'm grateful that I'm not all bloody and that there's a surgeon. But I'm not also trained that way. So I had a bloody nose, and Jesus started teaching me with it. And he's like, Greg, that wasn't Jesus. That's you picking your nose. Oh, okay. But this is Jesus's nose, and it wouldn't stop. And then Jesus started talking to me and said, you need to use your indoor voice, which I'm not using right now. And then, so I had this thing that wouldn't stop, had to put a tampon in my nose. And I mean, I'd go to the emergency room, the thing wouldn't stop. And so when those things happen anymore, I'm like, okay, what do you want, Lord? I mean, am I just on the cross here and you just want me to suffer? Or is there something you want me to know? And he wanted me, I believe, so this is me imagining, like if there was some kind of purpose to this, and that's what Emily's kind of like, maybe there's a purpose to this. So I loved how she was like, maybe I'm not supposed to do all this woodwork. And I love it because she's like, maybe I'm supposed to be a little lazier. I'm supposed to just sit down in that comforter. That sounds like a story I want to go for too. Yeah, maybe you just want me to stay in bed for a week, Jesus. Sweet. I don't have to do handyman work. You know why? Because I can't. I don't have to go swimming. You know why? Go ahead, Emily.
Well, the thing is, you said that sounds great. And see, to me, that sounds absolutely depressing. Like it is 100% depressing to me to sit around. Like it really is. Like right now, I'm like, I'm not going to paint today. I'm going to do this stuff. And I'm already like, really want to paint. I'll just be really careful. So I'm like getting already to paint it because I'm just like, my doctor said, just use my arm. Maybe I'll just like paint with my elbows.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't paint with my elbows because I don't have a glove that'll fit it.
Well, and that's true because
I'll just like, I don't know what I'll do. I'll just like rub it. I just can't like grab things.
And
I
Emily's
don't know.
built.
But anyway, so to me, like what you're describing, like that is miserable because I'm stuck and I can't read either. Like reading a book hurts my arms, even if I'm using like a holder, doing like this motion to like touch my Kindle screen or to go like this to like touch a phone screen. And audiobooks are way too slow. And when I speed them up, I can't follow it good enough. Like I'd rather just read it. So you know, so to me that's boring. That's so boring. I can watch TV for like 30 minutes.
Oh, I love
So
it. See, now
that's to
this,
me, and like I can't play Nintendo because that hurts. So like there's nothing I can do. Does that make sense? Like you
oh
can't
yeah,
use your hands, and I'm always a two-on-one person. Like
yes.
always.
And to a
You
person,
guys can tell. I'm talking to you and I'm doing stuff.
I love it. And I love that you're built that way because I am too,
Anyways,
in so many ways. And I love that as soon as you started talking that way, my mind was searching like, okay, well, so how can this be Jesus? And the truth is, another prophecy that Jesus gave me that was relevant to my life. So there's tons of prophecies out there in the Ensign, what they call the Liahona and the Book of Mormon, Bible. Most of them just aren't very interesting to you, but there'll be a few that are. Well, just because you need different things at different times. But one of those things, Emily, that relates to what you're talking about is Elder Maxwell said, if we are to be true disciples of Jesus Christ, he will eventually require of us that which is most difficult to do. And so Emily had this list of most difficult things to do, and it just said, do nothing. Emily, like, I don't really want to do nothing, very much so. In fact, that makes me want to go do something. That scares me. And so I'm kind of the same way. It's like when I had my nosebleed. There's not much you can do because you have to settle down. This thing you can't touch, you can't look at, has to cauterize itself and whatnot. And so I had to slow down, and I couldn't even do what I like to do most, which is talk, as you can see, as I hijack this episode of Jesus in This Mess. Feel free to raise your hands and stop me. And if we don't ever get to the part that I was aiming for, that's fine. Because I liked what you added, Emily. Anyways, I share that with you. I'm always working. A lot of times it's movie making or building some huge thing, and it's how I'm built. So I believe Jesus was slowing me down. And I do seriously believe I have to learn to use my indoor voice, slow it down, and I'll work at the rest of my life because that's just counter to who I was born. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it taking a while. I'll go on, but I want to see if you guys have any comments.
I just want to say I still want to hear about Jonathan's homelessness, and I'd like to figure out a way to tie that in.
Okay.
I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
I can.
Can you guys hear me at all?
Yes. You
can. Is it cutting out for you guys, or is it just me?
Nope, not cutting out.
It's cut out for me 2 times with Greg talking, like just barely Greg was talking, and it froze for about, I don't know, like a second. Felt like a long time.
Okay, I'm gonna I'm going to probably leave my video off so that it streams a little better to where I'm at. Because the data I'm connected to, I guess, is being kind of slow. So I'm gonna go ahead and let Emily see if she has something. I was so focused on the sketchiness of the video that I didn't catch the end of I caught some of what Greg said, but not all. So Emily, you go ahead, and then I know there were some things that Emily wanted to talk about today too. Once we get past whatever we're on right now. So I just wanted to mention that, but I'll pass it back.
Oh, I was just saying, all I was doing was just telling Greg, like, hey, I want to make sure we still get to Jonathan's stuff. That's all I said. And Greg kind of stopped and said he had more to say. So that's all we did.
Okay.
So I'll pass it back to Greg then.
Yep. And I'll just take about 5 more minutes and I'll keep it short. So we have these mundane instances in our lives. And Now, I don't need to speak more about the prophecy. I received this as prophecy written by somebody else. Um, at moments of sorrow and exhaustion, it's only too easy to look back over the years and feel that our lives have, in essence, been meaningless. We take stock of just how much has gone wrong, how many errors there have been, how many unfulfilled plans and frustrated dreams we've had. We may feel like the distraught, damned Macbeth, who, on learning of his wife's death, exclaims in a pitch of agony that man is a cursed creature who struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. No life can avoid an intermittently high degree of sound and fury. The question is whether it must also ultimately signify nothing, as Macbeth's lines hint. But this will depend on who is doing the telling. So I'm going to jump to this next part. Only a small number of us ever self-consciously write our autobiographies. It is a task we associate with celebrities, the very old, but it is, in the background, a universal activity. We may not be publishing our stories, but we are writing them in our minds, nevertheless. Every day finds us weaving a story about who we are, about getting a sliver in our hands, where we are going, and why events happen as they did. Many of us are strikingly harsh narrators of these life stories, or we're boring narrators. We hint to ourselves that we've been morons from the beginning. We've stuffed up real big time. It's one disaster after another. That's how we go about narrating, especially late at night when our reserves of optimism run dry and demons return. Yet there is nothing necessary about our self-flagellating methods of narration. There could always be ways of telling very different, far kinder and more balanced stories from the very same set of facts. Listen to this part. You could give your life story to Dostoevsky, Proust, or Jesus, my favorite, and come out with a rather bearable, moving, tender, and noble story. Good, by which is mean fair-minded and judicious. Narrators know that lives can be meaningful even when they involve a lot of failure and humiliation. Mistakes do not have to be absurd. They can be signs of how little information we have on which to base the most consequential decisions. Messing up isn't a sign of evil. It's evidence that what we're up against. Not all the disasters were wasted anyway. Maybe we spent a decade not quite knowing what we wanted to do with ourselves professionally. Maybe we went through a succession of failed relationships that left us confused and hurt a lot of people. But these experiences weren't meaningless because they were necessary to later development, blah, 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 the rest. So that is the frame of reference from which I view my own stories as I'm telling stories. They've increasingly woven in Jesus. So back to this, I'll highlight that, my favorite part, that we could give up. Very few of us are self-conscious as we write those autobiographies. We just roll them out of our mouths, if you will. But you could, and here it comes, you could give up your life story to, and then they have options, Dostoevsky, Proust, or Jesus. I don't know who Dostoevsky is or Proust, but I'm sure they're good. But when I saw or Jesus, I'm like, oh yeah, I've given my life story up to Jesus. Most of us give most of our life story up to what's called mundane reality. It's like a reality that everyone would understand and would feature not angels and demons and so forth. Most of our day is spent, just like this School of Life emphasis is, things just happen. And that's fine if that's the story you want. But Jesus in this mess, I believe, for me, it highlights and emphasizes that maybe even things like getting stickers in your hands and having an experience with having to think about surgeons and money and time and limited, that's, what if it was set up? What if it was purposed by Jesus, or if not purposed, at least permitted by the King of Kings, he who has all knowledge? What if he permitted something like that to happen, my nose to bleed, or Emily to get a stick in her hand that became an issue where she needs surgery, or Jonathan still with him? What if that is not just an incidental thing, but it is a huge thing? And ultimately, like the Moody Blues song, we decide which is right and which is an illusion. And I've decided I'm going big on Jesus. So that's how I actually view others as well. So I have to let people know, oh, I may be interpreting it wrong, because they have their world, their story. I have mine. I believe that Jesus is all the time. He's on. He doesn't like, okay, let's take a break while she does this weird thing, get the sliver in her hand. No, that's not a break. That's mainline Jesus in my world. And so I allow, under Article Faith 11, we allow all men to tell whatever story they want. And so maybe they want to tell a little bit of Jesus' story, like, yeah, 10 or 20% of the time it's Jesus. Greg wants, like, I want to do this 100% Jesus. And telling that kind of story, like it's 100% Jesus, that has its own challenges. The problem of evil, philosophy 101. You'll have, yeah, it's not an easy story to tell, believe me. And I'm not there. I'm not 100% tied into that. But I 100% believe it. I believe that all of our experiences, all of them, every single one is on the edge of eternity. It is, and it's left for us to decide, okay, well, even if it is, I'm not going to tell that story. I'm not going to get all hopped up on it. I'm not going to try to draw life lessons from everything. If Jesus wants to taught me, he can give me the normal, woo, big old freaking miracle, or crash in the car, but slivers, and I'm down with that. I totally get it, and I'm fine. And with that, I still leave at least 20 minutes to hear about a homeless story. You guys make any comments you want? Ready to be a listener.
Do you have anything, Emily?
Nope, you can go ahead. I'm interested to see how we tie this all together.
Huh.
I've also been this week kind of thinking about a lot about your homelessness stuff. I've been not even planned this way, right? Because Jesus is in everything. I like to read books. I was reading some fantasy books, and they mentioned the life of George Mueller. Are you familiar with his story, both of you?
I
No.
think so. Is he the one that had the orphanages?
Yeah, yeah. It seems like, and Greg, do you know who he is? He seems like something both of you would be extremely into. Greg, do you know who he is?
I don't. George Mueller, huh?
You should definitely look him up and read him. He was a read about him. He was a guy in the 19th century who decided to run like better orphanages, and he part of his thing is he wasn't gonna like organize or ask for money or anything ever, and he was just gonna depend on God for everything. And so his story is just about him just relying on God for everything, a lot like what you've done, only he was with all these orphanages, and he was able to create change the life of orphanages in like England, and had thousands of children, and like they just everything just showed up when they needed it, like when they needed food, when they needed money. It's really quite amazing. So I wasn't planning on I've studied him before, and so when this book mentioned it, I was like, so there, this book was just, it's a historical fiction, but it was just like, what would have happened to the orphans later in life who were raised on this concept that God will provide everything that you need when you need it, because that was essentially what he taught them. And so anyway, so as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about you and Jonathan, and I was like, so I'm interested to see how all of that plays into here too. That's just what I've been thinking about this.
Excellent.
Okay,
I
that's
copied the link, so I'll read about it. Thanks.
Yeah.
So if at any point I start cutting out, please let me know, because I think my internet's a little sketchy. So that is a perfect place to start, and I'm actually kind of glad that you gave that beginning, because to be honest, this may be something we talk about in and out, off and on, for a long time, because well, it's, for one thing, it's just part of it'll come up because it's in my heart and mind. But there's too much. When you talked about the homelessness thing, I was like, wow, how do I even begin? Because there's too many stories, there's too much around it. But that's actually a perfect place to begin. So I'll tell you kind of where I met George Mueller. So there was a period in my life where I had a lot of responsibility. Um, I uh, I uh, I had a business. Um, uh, I had medical bills. I had I had other responsibilities. And time, I would guess that just before I could even eat or put food on the table or anything like that for the people I loved, I had probably, let me think about this. I guess, well, I can't remember now, but it probably would be, and for me, this was a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of people nowadays, but at the time, I think it was probably about 5 grand or more, just basic baseline, just covering um, my my basic bills. It's probably more than that. I can't remember. At the time, though, for me, that was a lot. I wasn't raised with a lot of we never had a lot of money, and I don't know that I was really that great with money. I still don't know if I am in the way the world is anyways. So at that time I came across George Mueller, and I'm not sure if it's an autobiography or a biography, but I read the story, the book that was written about him. Um, and
Yeah.
I was fascinated, and it was one of these periods where like I'll get hooked on something, and I'll read like everything I can about it, or watch a bunch of YouTube videos, and I'll kind of be on that thing for like weeks or a couple months or something. And that was one of them, and I was entranced because I had always thought this way. I had always, like in my mind, that was the way of life that always made sense to me. In fact, I remember when when I first got married, I had some people advise my wife to be that I might not be the best candidate because I thought this way. Like I remember being asked, so what are you going to do to provide or whatever? And I said, well, God will provide. God always provides. And that answer was not liked at all. And so when I came across George Mueller, I was like, oh wow, this guy gets it. And so I read it all, and so I did exactly what he um, recommended, which is that I got a journal, and I began to write down every prayer. So he had a journal, and he would write down every time he needed something, because he actually said that the reason he started the orphanage, I mean, he wanted to care for the orphans because they were just everywhere, and these urchins in the street. So that was important to him too. But he said that the main reason he did it is he wanted to show the world about faith and how faith works, and that it actually does work. He wanted his life to be, as Greg would put it, a living parable. And so he he decided he would do this, and this is the way he would show the world. And so he wrote down every prayer, and then he would write down when it was fulfilled. So like needed um, bread for the orphans on this day, and at 11:03 a.m. somebody came by with bread and milk, and then he would do the next one, the next one. And at one point he says he had a record of over 10,000 prayers that had been answered. So I got myself a notebook, and I began to do this. And it was at a time where my business was very volatile, and I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out how to make it stable, such high overhead and stuff, that it made it so that it caused problems. And so I began to write down every single prayer, and some were fulfilled here and there. But I started doing this right at the time that my business started to kind of ebb. It was like, and the things started to kind of go downhill. And And I did this for probably the better part of a year. And I got so depressed that I stopped. I got rid of the book. And I remember praying to God at the time, like, God, there is obviously something I am not getting. What is different between George Mueller and me? Why is it, you know, why did it work for him, but it's not working for me? And so you could say in a lot of ways, my life has been a series of questions about money for about the last decade and a half. It's like it's a massive part of what I've done. And most of those questions have been directed toward God. And so it's like, and what I didn't realize at the time was that God had to take me on a journey because there were things that were so kind of wrong-minded in the way that I thought about economy and finances and etc. Things that weren't just me. I mean, some things, like I was raised with a poverty mindset. So like that's taken years to begin to look at things a little bit differently. But um, but not just that, but like there are things which I didn't even realize, which are you could say are, how do I put this? They're societal, or they're a part of my culture. And see, those are a lot harder because it's like, you would never guess that many of the things that everyone else are doing are antithetical to this thing that allows for every good thing you need to flow from the throne of God, including temporal means. It's like, who would guess that like an entire society, an entire economy, an entire culture would set up frameworks which are completely antithetical to that working. And I didn't understand that. And so, I think that was a beginning, is that it's like, because I had these deep questions, I think is part of the reason why God needed to lead me on a path that led through homelessness, through having to beg, through having to look at the world and at the way I handled the blessings that flowed to me from God. I had to look at them from a completely other mindset. Um, and and I can say the one thing that comes to mind, there's probably dozens and dozens, but one main thing is that I can see now is that I wasn't low enough. I was not nearly low enough. I did not have an understanding very well of all of what I really needed at the time. Oh, so, well, we just have grown up in a culture that I think we're a long ways from where George Mueller's culture was. And his culture was deeply flawed, but it's almost as if we don't even understand the frameworks under which he and God kind of worked that out. Um, so that's a beginning. Before I go on from any more from that, I'll just turn it back to you guys, see if you have any thoughts or questions. But um, I love that you started with George Mueller. I hadn't even thought that was a major key early thing that happened in my journey. That that eventually would, part of the school of all that would lead through homelessness and other things. But any thoughts, you guys, or questions?
I have a question. So my question is, so you were trying to do what George Mueller did and you got really depressed? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Oh, dang. Because I was like, hey, that was, you're talking about it at first. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna try that. I should do that with my kids, but now I'm like kind of scared. So no, I'm just like waiting. Like, where's the story going? That's really where I am. Just keep going.
Greg, do you have any questions or thoughts?
Just the only thought is that I believe we're all on the path of George Mueller. I believe that we need assistance to do that. I believe that most of us have to be broken, which means, unfortunately, mentally, physically, that ultimately we have to descend below all things. So I'm very interested in reading about him, but that's the wider frame by which I'm viewing what you're doing, and then its relationship to other people. That one way or another, we have to have an approximation, because that's true. All of us have to have an approximation of Jesus. We don't all have to go through the same experiences, but we have to go through an approximation of those experiences. Maybe mentally in our head, feel like outcast. Yep, everybody's got to do that. We all have to go into the wilderness. All of it during this life, I don't know. Probably not. Probably some of us, but I've lived, as you've known, and as I know about you, we've lived a closer approximation to in terms of poverty and brokenness, having something inside of us broken, and that's what I need. If God really wanted me to do the that Mueller's thing, he would have to assist me by breaking me, and he has. Okay, that's my comment.
Cool. Are you still talking, or oh yeah, it looks like you stopped. Good.
Yeah, I was gonna add one more thing to that. It just kind of reminds me to what I'm doing right now. So what I did is I made a big mess of this painting and I covered it in dark, and then I was like I need more power to clean this off. So I just took it out here to a hose and I just sprayed it off. And then as I spot this off, I'm going to try to make a mess and find Jesus in it. I don't know. It brought me, I don't know. It just reminded me of that same thing, that there just has to be, it's like I have to do something and I have to make a really big mess out of it. And then I have to try to fix it, but it's not me. It's me trying to find Jesus in it. And it's really weird on this because I kept spraying it and the dark's only coming off in certain sections. These other sections, it's just not coming off. Like I'm spraying it. It's the same stuff, the same water, and it's not coming off. And so it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. It's like with your story.
Well, that's good. I love that. And I think one takeaway from that too is that it's like, so you have a choice, like you took it out and you're like, well, okay, I'm going to spray this off, but you have a choice now to believe. You can either believe, oh, darn, it didn't do what I thought it would do, or you get a choice to believe, and this is what I know you do, Emily, it's like, well, if it didn't come off, it wasn't meant to come off. And that's one of the things I've learned in my own path with Christ, is that it's like there are certain flaws within me that he has never removed, and he's kind of indicated to me that he doesn't intend to. He wants, like Greg started out talking about the thorn in the flesh, and that was because you have a thorn in the flesh, and so did Paul. And it's like, and what does God say? So sometimes we pray, and like I did with my list of things that I believed that I needed, and I'm saying, and given I wasn't even asking for extravagant things. I was asking for what I saw as the bare necessities, and we think that God is going to that He's going to think that we need the same things that we think that we need, and that's not the case. So it's like he leaves a thorn in the flesh. He leaves a problem here, a problem there, because for him it's not a problem. It's part of, maybe without that flaw, without that. I think about Paul. It's like, take somebody who just can't keep his mouth shut and is always getting in other people's face about his own beliefs. It's like, have you ever met somebody like that it's like they just can't help but just shove their opinions in your face? I kind of get that impression about Paul. There's a reason why he was stoned so many times, and from this place and that, and maybe that was the thorn in his flesh, as he thought to himself, God, I just can't stop doing this. It's like, why do I have to get in everybody's face and just push them, push them to the brink? And he's like, no, that's okay, Paul. That's why I sent you. That's why I sent Paul. That's why I leave that thorn in your flesh. Of course, we don't know if that was the thorn he was talking about. So to go back to George Mueller and to you asked about the homelessness thing. It's like yeah, I'm not quite sure how to tie it in now because it's, it's, oh, it's just its own. But I guess where that begins is that was a beginning, and that was the point at which things began to unravel, and it's the point at which I began to unravel, because I was not able to, I wasn't smart enough, wasn't strong enough, or wise enough, or whatever, to hold all of that together, all the things I was trying to hold together at that time in my life. And that doesn't mean I ever gave up on those things. And to this day, I'm still living to fulfill those things that slipped past me. But but um, we get a choice, like Greg was saying earlier, we get a choice to believe, to have Christ tell us about our story. And in my story, it was purposeful that I broke. It was purposeful that I was unable to hold it together. I remember a time within probably a year or two after the time that I described, I remember a time where I was sitting in my office, um, and I would work for about 10 minutes, and then I would have a panic attack, and I'd have to lay down prostrate on the floor for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and try to completely relax. And then I could get up and I could work for another 10 minutes. And then fast forward um, another year, maybe 2 years after that, um, almost 2 years after that, and during this period, as I'm going downhill, I had many people who were generous and tried to give me some money here and there, tried to help me with work here and there, tried to offer me jobs. And I took some jobs here and there. I did temporary work, which had been kind of prophesied in a blessing that I had received, that I would have temp jobs that would eventually lead to something that would support my family. And but everybody around me could tell I was unraveling, and I was dropping, not purposefully, but just like one thing after another. I couldn't handle, and and it's we've talked about this before. It's so much easier when you have a broken leg because you can point to the cast. When it's in your brain or in your soul, it's like it's harder. And the strange thing that was happening too at the same time is it's like as my ability to do things temporarily was deteriorating, it was like you could say my spiritual life was kind of exploding. It was like I was seeing more and more things that had to do with the kingdom of God. Um, and it was you could say that was part of what was undoing me. I was already, because of my own faults and everything, kind of unraveling. But then it was like, it would be like if somebody came to you and said, and kind of pointed out to you that like everything you were doing, say your job as a teacher or something, how it wasn't what you thought, and that maybe you're not even helping these kids. Maybe it's like it's doing no good at all. It's like, I don't think that's the case at all. I think you're doing much good. But if someone did that to you and they could actually show you that that was the case, it would make it much more difficult for you to continue to get up and go to work. And that was kind of happening with me. It's like it was like God was like showing me the world and the way that we think, like almost from a higher perspective in a way. And it was and I've heard people who like the Easterners, like when they have like they call it nirvana, or they have an enlightenment moment, like some of them will become completely useless, like, and and they'll just like sit in the woods, like, and they look like they're like meditating and they're like half there, but it's like like, and some of them like they kind of they'll come back together later on and they can start to function again. I don't know if you ever, sorry, I am coming around to the homeless thing, but it's taken me a second. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Eckhart Tolle. Emily, have you heard of him?
Nope.
Okay, so he's somebody to look up. He's one of the spiritual thought leaders, like the he's really great. If you ever listen to him, he talks about being present and you could say he's a spiritual teacher, and he's all over the internet. You can find him on YouTube. But he talked about he had this experience when he was 29, and basically what happened is that like he kind of detached from his ego. He was completely miserable, suicidal, was basically about to end it all. And something happened one night, and he saw something like spiritually, like, and he saw it like it was like he became detached from who he was. And he said he woke up the next morning, like everything was just like beautiful, like all of that horrible, you know, the horribleness that he had been dealing with was gone. And and he um and he was basically a totally different person after that, because it was like he realized that he wasn't who he thought he was, and like he was actually getting a PhD, and he taught at I think it was Cambridge at the time. He was one of the student teachers, and he kept doing that for a little while, but like after about 6 months, I think he said, he was like a knowing came. I'm going to walk away from the PhD. And he walked in and he told him, I'm leaving. And then he spent 2 years bench. And he said he hardly ate. There was a Buddha temple, and he would go over there because they would feed him. And if he was lucky, he got one meal a day. But it was like he had seen something almost and I've heard of near-death experience people who like they'll have a near-death experience, and then it becomes really difficult for them to reassimilate into life afterwards. Um, and because it's like once you've seen something from that perspective, and you've seen kind of this otherworldly thing, it's like this world is kind of depressing. They come back and sometimes they're really depressed for a while, and they have a hard time. And sometimes like they lose jobs, family will kind of leave them because they're totally different when they come back. And it's like, so I went through something like that. So as my ability to provide is deteriorating, going down the drain in a funnel, like I'm seeing like things in an explosive way, like one thing after another after another. And then um so the first time I was homeless, there came a point where I realized I'd kind of worn out my welcome everywhere. The people I loved were finding ways to take care of their needs on their own, because I could do less and less jobs. But I was still kind of trying. I made this last ditch effort, and I went to be with some family, and I had been told to write. God had told me on a mountain down in southern Utah to go write. And so he had given me an idea for a story. And I was so fragile, like I couldn't even, in my mind, it was hard for me to hold it together even in a temporary job. And this was like my last ditch effort. I said, I'm going to try to write this thing. And I went down and I spent 3 months. And I remember I had the idea. It's funny, it's always 2 or 3 months I'm given to write something. And if I don't get it done, it's over. I'll have to come back to it years later. But the point being is, like, I remember I had 3 months, and I tried and miserably failed to get the story out. And while I'm writing it, a few times I drove up to Salt Lake, or I would take the tracks up. I think I had a bus pass, maybe, I can't remember, and I to Salt Lake, and I would and while I was up there, I saw the homeless people, and God kept saying to me, "You're going to be with these people soon. You're going to be with these people soon." And it was freaking me out like nothing else. I was like, "What?" Of course, he'd already freaked me out a number of times, but I was like, what in the world? And of course, I have people who are telling me at the time, you're going crazy. And I'm like, yes, I think you're right. Uh, but it's only partly crazy. There's something else going on. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, am I going crazy? I must be going crazy. And and I remember so you're going to be around these people, and I thought to myself, okay, well, I can't do that. And so I just hunkered down. I was staying with some family, but I was so like I was so whacked, like from day to day. Like I would say one thing and then I would say the opposite the next because it was like I was living in two worlds. It was like I was seeing things from the rational perspective, the way that everybody thinks in this world. And I'd be like, okay, no, I got to be like this. And the next day I'd be like, you know what, you guys, this is all wrong. We got to be, and I would go on back and forth. And somebody that I was close to that I was staying with, they were like, you're making me crazy. It's like, you're going to drive me insane. I need you to leave, they said. And I remember I thought to myself, well, I still have kind of a few friends, kind of. But already so many people have done so much and they've been so good and so loving. They've helped with money here and there. They've helped to take care of my family. It's like I could go to one more person and sleep on a couch, but I'm not feeling it anymore. And what I felt too is it's like, you know what? I want to be what I am. I want to be at the level I am. And it's like, and I realized it's like I can't support, a family in the state I'm in. I can't even support myself. I can't even keep the temp jobs together enough to and I thought to myself, well, and I thought about what God had been saying for about a month and a half about the homeless people, and I remember like I packed a bag like a backpack, just like a school backpack, and I was staying in the South Salt Lake County area at the time. And I walked out onto Redwood Road and I started walking towards Salt Lake City. I didn't even have the bus fare to get from South Salt Lake County up to Salt Lake because I knew that there was a homeless shelter up there. And so and as I was walking, somebody I knew, and I decided for the first time in my life to hitchhike. So I put out my thumb as I'm walking along, and somebody I knew, a woman I knew and her kids saw me, recognized me. I don't think she normally picks up hitchhikers. And she said, are you okay? Are you okay? I didn't tell her I was going to the homeless shelter. I said, I need to get to Salt Lake. But, as far as you can go is fine. And she drove me up there. And then I spent 2 weeks in the homeless shelter. And we can talk about more about that, in the future. I think we're probably close to time, but that's a little bit of the story of how I came to homelessness the first time. Any thoughts or questions?
I'm just very much into this story. I'm still trying to figure out. We go from trying to be faithful, like to George Mueller. I don't know how to say it. Anyways, to essentially losing everything and just becoming so depressed and so. And what I'm just trying to restate what I'm understanding from your story, but becoming so, yeah, just really stuck in a deep, deep depression. And unable to work, unable to hold a job. I don't know, it just seems like you had nowhere else to go, right? It
Yeah,
almost
I'd
sounds to
say,
me, yeah, it almost sounds to me too like you were like, I don't deserve to go anywhere. And that also sounds like it, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just hearing that in. Like it was a big self-hate time, it sounds like too. Maybe not though.
it was like two things. As you mentioned, a deep, deep depression. Um, it wasn't. I should probably correct that a little bit. There was definitely times where I was depressed. And when I went to the homeless shelter, I was very depressed. Like it felt like my life was over, and it basically was. It was one of the times that it kind of got a reboot, you could say. But at the time, uh, but at the time, I wouldn't say that it was a prolonged depression. Um, but I would say that it was its own kind of what you might say mental illness. Um, it was it was well, and so you said two things. I'm trying to tie the two. Oh, and the George Mueller thing and how I went from George Mueller to that. So, oh, can you restate? Can you synopsize your question?
I can try to. So I was just saying,
Okay,
it's crazy to
please,
me how you went from
if I
like
can get
George
it.
Mueller is this example of faith, and you're like, I'm going to try to be faithful like George Mueller. And that sounds like something I would try to do. I'm going to try to write down things that I asked, and when they're answered, I'm going to write it down. So it sounds like the things you were asking for weren't answered, so you got really depressed. And I don't know if it was like God doesn't love me or I'm not doing something right. I don't know. That's where I'm trying to like I'm trying to make the connection because I'm like, well, I wanted to do what George Mueller did, and would that be bad? You know, like that's kind of what that's where I am in my head.
And so,
Okay.
and so I'll also frame that because that would be new to my understanding, Emily, is the way Jonathan is taught to me. It was um, uh, a breakdown because that's when I got born again. I had mental illness, which is it started with mania, depression, and anxiety. And so just to look back on that, it wasn't, I was commencing with some big spiritual endeavor. I didn't know I was. And so I would be hesitate to frame it like a premeditated, I'm going to go big on Jesus. No, but I later could realize, oh, I must have been asking for this, or destined for it because it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And it was calamity for me, my family. So I had, at least a year of mental illness, unstable for maybe 2 months, but functional, be like a functional alcoholic. Okay, now he's functional crazy guy. But um, so Jonathan, correct us if we're wrong, because it sounds, because Emily be right, like sounds like, man, I was doing this project. I thought, let's see what happens when I do what George Mueller does. I'm going to test it out. Um, and the way I understood it is more like I wrecked on my bike. Um, uh, but yes, you have a good heart, Jonathan, and I think throughout your life, because that's why I also know other parts of your story going all the way back to childhood, the desire to line up with God's alignment. Jonathan has always wanted to do what's right and good, and I like that about him. But anyways, it's his story. I'm not going to tell it. So maybe he'll say, no, Emily's right. It was a total project and it went bonkers, but in a good way. Okay, go ahead, Jonathan. Tell it in any correction. You're up, Jonathan. We're back. We're back. At least one of us is. We're still recording.
I know.
Okay, we're back.
Well, it makes me wonder if he's gonna. Let's wait and see if he sends us. I don't know if he has to do a
No,
new link
we're
or
in.
I don't
I'm
know.
in.
what.
But I just want to hear more about your story. But I'm like, no, we gotta wait.
Here. I'm here. I can hear you
Oh,
guys.
hey, there's.
I hear you. I hear you. I hear you.
You're here.
Yep, I'm
Okay.
I
here.
think we're back.
Your
Yep.
recording stopped. Okay. I
No,
don't think it's recording though.
it is recording. It is recording. It is recording.
Just keep painting then.
Yeah, just
Okay,
keep paying for now.
we're on.
Well, I'll talk about
I
it.
need
And
to.
We're on. We're on. We're on.
All right.
Go ahead.
okay, can we hear you, Greg?
Yep, we're good.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll pick up where I was at. We're recording, right?
Yep, we're recording. Yep.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I think I understand now the question. So basically, they're almost like two things which are slightly detached but connected. So um, so I had a reason why money was important to me at the time, and it wasn't Maseratis or bigger houses. Um, and it seemed very much, I thought, Greg or George Mueller had a purpose, and so do I. And so, um, and I had this sense that it was like, um, I needed help. I'll just put it that way. Like I was trying to carry a large burden. And if you can imagine like a truck that's pulling a big load, and it gets on a little bit of rough gravel or mud or something, and the wheels begin to spin, and it's trying to find every way it can to get some traction. That's part of what George Mueller was for me, was that it was like, because most people would say, okay, if you have financial problems, go to the financiers, right? Go to the people who've made a lot of money and ask them questions, read the self-help books. Well, for me, I was never drawn to those things. I was. I've probably been drawn as much as the next guy, like, oh, I can make some money, but it was like there was two things going on, and I was more drawn to this idea that God would provide. I had always been fascinated by, like Christ said, consider the lilies and all that, and it was like I really believed that, and like I remember like telling people that I believed that, and they're like, well, you can't take it literally, and 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 I remember being like, well, then what's the point, And so for me, you could say that reading George Mueller, the reason he fascinated me so much was because he was a solution to a financial problem. He was what I considered an embodiment of Christ's solution to money problems. And so you can see that already my footing that as I went into the George Mueller thing, like it was partially a spiritual endeavor, but it was a very practical endeavor for me. So it's like, I think in some ways I had already begun kind of to unravel a little bit even then, because some of the things I was doing, like to make money, like I could tell that it wasn't working for me the way that it worked for other people. Um, and I, I wanted, um, and so it wasn't so much like, oh, I tried this thing with George Mueller and it didn't work, and I got super depressed and ended up, in the homeless shelter. It was like, um, all that while, imagine that truck with its tires spinning, trying to move forward. It was like, it, I know that some people like will get depressed and they can't get out of bed to go to work. It's like, that wasn't so much my problem. My problem was that I couldn't leave work alone. I couldn't take a vacation. I couldn't go anywhere without thinking about how I was going to solve these financial problems. And like that truck that gets in the mud and the wheels begin to spin, um, and maybe you come back an hour later, and you're like, you tell them, stop pushing on the gas. You're just digging yourself deeper. Well, that was me. It's like, stop pressing on the gas, Jonathan. You're just digging yourself deeper. And it's like, and in the end, it's like what happened is that all the people around me just had to like told them to, only they didn't see it the way the guy would see someone who's, stuck in the mud. Um, but, um, but it was it was just, oh, how do I put this? I think that the thing that's hard to describe is that it's like the one thing I heard you say that was that I wouldn't say was quite right is that depression was not my main problem. Just a second, I just got to check on something. I'm on my podcast. I'll be out in a bit.
One of the things I recognize.
I'm back. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, one of the things I recognize from my own experience is that fear had gripped Jonathan. That's what I recognize about my own born again experience. Like I said, it started as mania, and I remember I had this fixation on my career and worries about it. And so it was like providing for the family. So both of us had a provider role that was kind of like the practical problem that we're trying to address. And that is one of the biggest pressures if you're following a traditional pattern where the male is the one who's going to be the provider. Then that's one of the huge burdens you carry, gratefully, but you can either just do it or worry about doing it. Sometimes there's factors that make you worry. Worry is a symptom of fear. And so being gripped by fear is a great thing if you turn to God, because otherwise all is well in Zion. Those aren't fearful people. Those are people, all is well in Zion, yea, Zion prospereth. You're not fearful, all right?
I think that we just might have to be about ending today.
Yep, we can pick it up. This actually might be a good place to pick up because it'll give me a chance to think on what you asked, because it's something he said. I caught a little bit at the very beginning, and it made me realize it's like, oh, okay, but now I've lost it.
Go on with what you're saying.
It's great.
Says,
Back.
Yeah, I'm
he's
back.
back, but I don't see him.
I guess if you want to just close it up, I'll pick it up there. Oh, okay.
Wonder if we ought to close for this time, Greg, and we'll just pick it up from there next time.
We didn't catch almost anything you said.
That's right. Yeah, let's pick it up next time. I'll just share my comment with you, Jonathan, offline. So we'll end this. Thanks for joining us. Sorry, a little technical difficulties, but Jesus is in the mess, so I expect it's just fine.